All right, we're live. Let's make sure we got everything going here. All right. Can everyone, I guess everyone can hear me. This is Bob Irvin. Okay, good. Great song to kind of kick off today's session. The year was 1976, and most of you probably know it was Stevie Wonder. Isn't She Lovely was about his daughter who was just born. And the song, I don't know if it was probably a top 20 or 30 hit, but the song comes from the album Songs in the Key of Life, which according to Rolling Stone was the number 4th best album of all times. Best album, yeah, number 4. And I thought I'd share that with you because you could talk about your daughter, but you can certainly talk about Mother Earth too in this case. And so I appreciate the opening that what we're trying to do here is restore the future forever and for our children. So thank you, Bob Irvin, Jules Accelerator. We've got a fast-paced 75 minutes. We got some great presenters and speakers here to talk to you, but it's my pleasure to really introduce our cohort number 8. And that's going to be the focus of today's session. I'm going to let me put on my presentation here real quick for you all, and we'll run through that. View it. Let's do a full screen mode. So you saw our first slide. We got James Newcomb, Brian Savoy, Vic Shao, and the startups of Cohort 8. This is our 8th cohort. You can see we're a nonprofit. We identify, advise, connect, and deploy clean tech startups in North Carolina. Again, we're not a policy focused organization. We're really trying to help the entrepreneur get market traction in our region. We've advised over 55 companies, 8 cohorts that have gone on to raise $350 million and create over 1,000 jobs. And I would say in North Carolina, you could just take probably 10% would apply to North Carolina. We also are excited because last week we got a new grant from the Department of Energy with our partners E4 Carolinas and Savannah River National Lab. So that gives us $1 million to accelerate clean tech hardware in the Southeast. And you can see some of the grant collaborators from EPRI to Duke to NC State. So we're real excited about kicking that off probably on October 1st of this year for the next 3 years. We've mostly been focused recently on software, but we're going to be moving aggressively into hardware too. Now the agenda. Quick agenda today. I'll kick it off as I have. I'm delighted to have James Newcomb from the Rocky Mountain Institute, an old friend, kind of give us the keynote and how to find a market-based solution to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So he'll inspire us. Then I have Brian Savoy and Vic Shao talking about a collaboration between a big corporation and an innovative startup to accelerate electric vehicles. And then we're going to have 4 minutes to pitch. So each of the startups you see here, from 500, we knocked it down to 6, and they'll each get 4 minutes to pitch. We'll have a little Q&A at the end of the discussions, and Heather Lux will moderate that. And she'll talk to you a little bit about how to, once we get to that session, how to raise a question using Microsoft Teams. You can see our 6 startups come from we have one from Madrid. Most of them are, from the United States. We have one local. Of the 500 that we saw, probably over a third were female or underrepresented minorities, and by that they had co-founders that fit that category. So we were real excited about that. And the goals today really are to listen, to learn, to question, and then hopefully become an advisor to one of these startups where you can help them navigate the ecosystem, navigate your company, we can help them challenge their business plan, and hopefully find business development connections, because we're all about pilots and demonstration projects. So with that, I will turn off my deck and I will introduce James Newcomb. And James is an old friend. We probably go back 30 years. I can remember being on a panel with him working with Enron's Retail Energy Services Group. And that was probably in the early 90s. Maybe you were with eSource at the time, but you've always been a visionary, someone who focused on market-based solutions, someone I've always admired. I really appreciate all that you do for us. And I think you are with the premier nonprofit clean tech, climate tech advisory firm in the world. And so it's a real privilege for me to introduce James to you. We share some common music. We went to Berkeley and Harvard. And again, James, it's all yours. Thank you for agreeing to keynote for this announcement of our Cohort 8.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So I lead a team now at RMI that, can you see those slides?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
You do. Perfect. Okay. I lead a team at RMI that focuses on long-term global energy pathways and their implications for the economy and for climate. And I want to share with you, as Bob said, a few perspectives on what it takes to get to a 1.5C pathway and how we can do it. When Bob asked me for a musical reference, I invoked Jackson Browne because I thought of this poetic song that he wrote years ago, Before the Deluge. And I think our ambitions to transform the energy system in a decade are the realm of dreamers and fools and brave entrepreneurs, all of whom carry the energy of the innocent in trying to make a transition in the energy system in a very, very fast fashion. There's a number of reasons why we're focused on 1.5C that are both scientific and institutional and have to do with collaboration. The first of those really is that it's a very hard-won, internationally agreed outcome-based target. The work to try to call attention to climate thresholds began more than 15 years ago. Some of you might recall the famous underwater press conference that the president of the Maldives held in 2009 that called attention to the special sensitivity of island states to climate change and the dramatic consequences faced there. But what happened in Paris in 2015 was a consolidation of those goals, setting a reference for an ambition for well below 2C, and 1.5C was codified in the Paris Agreement really as the gold standard high ambition climate action. So it's a benchmark that has a lot of importance institutionally. But what we've learned since 2015 from the science side is that there's reason for us to be cautious about thinking that going beyond 1.5 or 2C and being able to actually manage what happens in the Earth system is a high-risk proposition. This is from a paper published by the National Academy of Sciences on the hothouse Earth hypothesis that says that we might be triggering at 1.5C or 2 degrees, somewhere in that threshold, a series of feedbacks. These are the big global changing feedbacks, like what happens to the Amazon, what happens to the West Antarctic sheet, and so on, that could cascade into one another and put us on a trajectory that means that we miss the window for stabilizing climate in the Earth system and might see thousands of years of much higher temperatures once all of the polar ice is gone and some of essentially a new planetary regime takes hold. There's been some recent science on this published just in the last 10 days, looking at this kind of domino effect and tipping points in climate systems and warning again about that 1.5 to 2 degree threshold where this might be especially important. So the other dimension of 1.5C targets has to do with risk exposure. On the left, you see here countries sized according to their historic greenhouse gas emissions. So our share of contribution to the current problem, and you can see Europe and the US are a large share of that. But on the right-hand side, the number of people exposed to the extremes of floods, droughts, and temperature variations that come from warming in that range of 1.5 to 2 to 3 degrees. But I think the good news around all of this is that a 1.5C pathway is in fact economically beneficial. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the IEA's recent report, but I just want to flag here that the IEA report that describes the 1.5C pathway assesses that this pathway would create 25 million net jobs relative to a business as usual scenario. It would reduce premature deaths from air pollution by more than 2 million lives per year by 2030. And it would generate about 0.4% per year additional global GDP growth. So there's a pretty positive economic story associated with actually getting us on a 1.5C pathway. So how can we get there? First of all, there's a lot of talk now about net zero 2050, and I want to underscore that that's great. It's really important to see those commitments. They're a step in the right direction, but they certainly don't ensure that we're aligned to a 1.5C pathway. Net zero is an endpoint, not a pathway. And so if we're looking at any of the scenarios that are 1.5C aligned, they have a steeper curve in the next decade. The IEA has offered a new 1.5C roadmap that's a really important milestone for us. It gives us a frame of reference from what is the most widely respected sort of institutional provider of these kind of long-term energy scenarios. Of course, everybody has some differences with that scenario, but I think it's a really important and credible benchmark of what it looks like to be on that kind of pathway. As you can see on the left side here, it definitely means a steep decline in emissions in this decade and the 2030s. And to get there requires some pretty extraordinary scaling of technologies. I'll give you a few examples of this and take a look at a couple sectors here, but just to give you a sense of this, solar and PV capacity additions by year increase about fourfold from today's levels to 2030, and electric car sales increase 18-fold from today to 2030. So we're seeing really quite extraordinary changes in the system. In both those cases, I think both the economics and the manufacturing pathways are looking pretty promising for that kind of change. So here's a couple of other indicators just to give you a sense of what that looks like. The IEA notes that we would need no new investment in oil, gas, and coal, no new oil fields, no new coal mines or mine extensions required. And by 2030, we'd see about 1,000 gigawatts a year of solar, wind, and wind additions. About 60% of global car sales would be electric. We'd see about 150 million metric tons of low carbon hydrogen. This is a really important part of the picture and a piece that RMI is doing quite a bit of work on with collaborators. And finally, coal demand down by about 50%. So that's the kind of pathway we're talking about. It's really interesting to look at the history of IEA forecasts on solar because they took a lot of criticism for about a decade. Every year, the New World Energy Outlook flatlined forward solar capacity additions globally. And finally, they started to get the message in 2020. But if you look at the net zero roadmap, they have dramatically charted a new course we think solar could do by the decade of the 2030s, coming up to better than 600 gigawatts a year of additions in that period. So the solar industry is off and running, as we know, is already the cheapest source of power at the margin everywhere, essentially. So there's a lot of momentum behind that part of the system. So a couple of other perspectives on the industrial side. This is the hardest to solve piece of the picture, and the IEA trajectory here doesn't get to net zero by 2050. It's a really tough challenge to solve in that sector, but it does invoke quite a lot of carbon capture and storage and hydrogen to make the pathway that's implied here. And you can go into the numbers of that IEA report, but you'll see the IEA is relying both on a significant amount of hydrogen and a very substantial electrification of industry to get there. So I want to round off with a few words about how we get there. We've seen a fundamental change in what's actually driving climate action, which used to be centric on nation states and the UN process. And increasingly, it's industry itself, voluntary actions by corporations and cities and others that's driving change. This means a kind of more distributed solution to the energy future. And one of the big vehicles for that this year is the aggregation of commitments in the pathway to the COP26 meeting in Glasgow this fall. You can see here the dashboard from their website, quite extraordinary commitments being made, and certainly important ones by the financial sector. BlackRock and others are driving that. And if you look at what these are actually translating to in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by sector, well, it's uneven, but it's definitely a really extraordinary set of early stage commitments, at least to net zero, that are being made by many of these actors. We think this is part of an ambition loop that exists between corporations, subnational governments, cities and states, and national governments, where there can be some, as there has been in a number of sectors, a kind of virtuous circle of raising ambition and raising corporate targets for action. We've seen that here in the US in renewable energy purchasing by big corporates. It started off with the tech companies, and now last year we saw close to 11 gigawatts of renewable energy purchases under PPAs by the big corporates. So it's one example of where that kind of virtuous cycle of raising ambition can exist. I want to give you another example to go a little farther afield, and this comes from India, and it's a program RMI has been involved with more than a dozen collaborators who are involved with final mile deliveries, package delivery in that space. The companies here created a common logo and platform for zero pollution delivery of e-commerce packages in India. This branding, includes Shunya in Hindi means zero. So it's a zero carbon, zero emissions solution. All the electric vehicles, the delivery people, the packages can all carry this common logo for zero emissions delivery. It's catalyzing a pretty rapid change in vehicle electrification in Delhi and other big cities in India. It's a coalition that invokes many competitors. Certainly, Walmart, IKEA, Flipkart, and others are brutal competitors in the e-commerce space, but they're working together to do something like this, which is to flip the system of package delivery to zero carbon in India. So a really exciting program we're starting to see. I want to leave you with 5 takeaways for early stage companies and investors from this kind of big picture of the landscape. The first, as you've heard, we think that corporate commitments to emissions reductions are going to drive markets for low carbon products and materials. So keep an eye on where those are advancing the fastest, because they'll create demand pull. Second, electrification really across the entire economy is a big driver, and hooking into those opportunities that are opening up is really important. Thirdly, there's incredible opportunities now for collaboration that are creating some of the fastest moving changes in the system. And again, keep your eyes out for where you can hook into those opportunities. We know that emerging markets is going to be a big driver of demand. And finally, really just, I think in the last 12 months, we've seen an extraordinary pivot towards more interest and more investment in dioxide removal and CCS types of solutions. So I know we're going to have a chance for questions later, so I'll leave it with that, and a beautiful picture or two of these beings of the dark ocean that inhabit our world, and hopefully we will have the opportunity to save them and extend the abundance of really beautiful life on this planet. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you very much, James. From Jackson Brown to jellyfish to the reduction of greenhouse gases. I mean, always you give us a lot to think about. There was so much there in that last 12 minutes. that I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in the slides and maybe asking some additional questions that we can follow up to. So if you contact Jules Accelerator or RMI, just going to their website, there's a lot there. And a lot of strategies, I think, should be aligned to sort of what your view is of the future. Thank you again, James. Really appreciate you will have time to get back and talk for a few minutes with questions. But next, I'd like to invite Vic Shao and Brian Savoy to the table. Jules always likes to recognize a success here and there, and we had one from about 18 months ago where Vic, a serial entrepreneur, has done this 2 or 3 times, very bright guy, very focused on disruption and energy innovation, has teamed up and collaborated with Duke Energy, a big utility, looking to make the changes that James was talking about. But they've come together to speed up electrification of vehicles. And I thought it'd be very helpful to kick it off to the two of them to talk about what they're doing and share the story with how they're helping the region. So I'll pass it to Brian.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are on the globe. It's a pleasure to be here. And Duke Energy's been part of the Jules ecosystem since its beginnings. And it's not only a place where our teammates actively serve and that they're coaching startups and helping connect them with opportunities, whether it's in our company or our space in the industry or with other corporates that are across the region. And as James was talking this morning, I think you did a fantastic job of framing why Jules exists, right? It's to find those next technologies that aren't quite commercially viable, but you've got, passion and energy and a great idea that needs to come together with commercialization to make this 1.5 degree Celsius goal real. And the path to net zero is one that we have a strong commitment to. I would say our climate strategy is connections with Jules are critical to find that next technology that will take us that much further and drop that curve faster, because it is a path to 75% reduction. Current technologies get you there. A path to net zero, we need breakthroughs. We need breakthroughs at commercial scale that are viable, that support affordability for our customers as well as reliability for our customers. We've got over 25 million people relying, provide them the energy they expect and deserve to live the lives they've come to know. So all of that said, with that in mind, I want to recognize Vic. We were connected with Vic back in 2019. I think his team came through the Jules Accelerator and with an outstanding innovation to optimize vehicle charging. And, we connected our solar rooftop business. Rec Solar is the brand. It's now folded into Duke Energy Sustainable Solutions, has partnered with Amply to provide a solar canopy with vertical charging. One first of its kind, and it's a great product offering. It's all wrapped with a power purchase agreement that's financed and leased. So it makes it affordable for fleets that are used to leasing their vehicles and only paying for the fuel and maintenance over time. So the capital investment is a big barrier for companies to electrify their fleets. And this combination of technology and financial expertise, as well as renewable energy, is just a beautiful piece of work. And Vic, I'm going to turn it over to you to go in more depth about that in Amp.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Bob and team, for creating the session. And Bob, congratulations on Jules Accelerator and how far it's come along the way over the years, and certainly Amply has grown alongside your efforts as well. So a bit about myself, the company. Amply is 3 years old, and we're fortunate enough to join Bob in Cohort 4, actually. So about, back in 2019, so a little more than 2 years ago. And we've grown quite substantially over the last several years, I would say. We now have live transit customers and private sector fleet operators, and our solution set is at a point where it's ready to scale and scale pretty, interestingly enough, along the same trajectory as other renewable technologies. But I'll just start by describing what Amply does. We have worked with hundreds by now. We've touched hundreds of fleet operators all across the country, and we've zeroed in on the major issues, the major barriers to adoption at scale. So first, the challenge, and I'm going to put up a few slides here to help with the here we go. Hopefully you guys can see the slides. It boils down to three major issues. First is that fleet operators are not used to a scenario where the pricing for fuel is going up or down by, in California, where I am, by 400% in a single day, right? We account for demand charges, time of use schedules, the fact that there are a couple of thousand utilities across the country, all with different, tariff structures. So that volatility is something new to fleet operators. They're used to a scenario where diesel or gasoline pricing is up or down by maybe 20% in a single year. So with volatility, then comes uncertainty. They're not sure if you're operating several thousand vehicles, they're not sure how to scale this and how to budget for their costs next week, next month, next year. So they're stuck, right? So that's a big issue. Second is that it's not a 5-minute fuel up scenario anymore. It's going to be several hours of dwell time, charging time. And what that means is you really need to fold that into the vehicle's daily workflows. So it means integration into the back office dispatch systems, scheduling systems, telematics, perhaps. So all of this is, and the fact that there are more and more vehicles that are coming out every week, every month, different charger manufacturers. So all three of these issues are actually, as it turns out, software-related challenges. So what Amply has created over the last several years is a operating system that rides on all and tackle these problems head on, and the result is uptime, performance, cost savings of managed charging. So I won't go into details of the software, but the analogy I think is as an operating structure, Linux perhaps, that delivers uptime performance at the lowest cost. And using the software platform, then we're able to provide charging as a service so that our customers are buying the output, buying the performance. In our case, it's kilowatt hours dispensed into the vehicle battery. Otherwise, Amply is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. The barrier to adoption for electric fleets is infrastructure. There's no bones about it. I mean, that we hear this over and over and over again from our fleet customers. So I'm going to actually pause here, and hopefully I know how to turn this off and get us all back to the regular Microsoft Teams session.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Brian. Heather, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead now and open up the option for you to come off of mute as well as turn on your video. So I'm just going to take you through your options. We have two ways to ask a question this morning. The first is, catch up here. Stand by 1 second. All right, and I just exited slideshow mode. So you should be able to see my screen, and across the top of your Teams, you have a control panel here. And if you click on this little guy right here, you can raise your hand and I will call on you. You can come off of mute and video, turn your video on, and you can ask your question live. Your other option, and there's your controls for video as well as mute. The other option is to type into the chat window and we will read your question there. And I've already seen a couple of those. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right. My first question in the chat window comes from Swati Daji, and her question, I believe, is for you, James. And she asked, what created the trigger for the competitors to collaborate on the efforts in India?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that they're competing and delivering packages, but they're well aware of the urgency of urban air quality issues, which in Delhi, for those of you who've been there, and Mumbai and other big Indian cities is crushing. And so anything that these companies can do that that raises their profile from the public benefit perspective is kind of in their interest. And this was an extraordinary kind of moment when they saw that opportunity and they saw that they could collectively bring that message forward with a shared brand and a big campaign behind it. So it's nice to see that. I think that there's those kinds of opportunities. We're of course working with the Mission Possible partnership that includes a whole group of it's really a platform for major industries to work in parallel fashion on emissions reduction. The first of those is the steel sector, starting to see collaboration in steel on emissions reduction as well.
Terrific. I have a quick follow-up question since I don't see any more at the moment. But are there any other industries that you think need to come together in a similar fashion, kind of lay down the competitive barriers and go after climate change together as an industry?
Yeah, there's a bunch actually. I mean, certainly aviation does, because there's an extraordinary long-term challenge for aviation to find a path forward, and it requires a lot of infrastructure and technology to do that. So that's one on the short list. But a couple of others. Shipping is an interesting area. There was an agreement of almost 2 years ago now in the shipping industry called the Poseidon Principles, set of decarbonization goal for that sector. And that's an area where I think for companies to lean forward into investment and technology is risky. And it's less risky if there's a common agreement of a pathway so that there's some degree of alignment. And especially where there's that alignment can be backed up by buy-side commitments. A good example of that is like green steel, where if you can get auto companies or other users of steel to commit to some share of green steel purchases, you can start to prime the pump for new technology in that space that opens up, maybe initially a premium market for green steel, but eventually when we look at those technology pathways, green steel can be pretty competitive at scale. It's going to take us a couple decades to get there. So I think these areas, and that's what REBA, the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance, did, really was try to ramp up the PPA purchasing as a way to reinforce renewable energy transactions. So those kinds of approaches have been pretty successful across quite a number of sectors.
Excellent. Great. Our next question comes from Jen Gallegos, who's asking Brian and Vic, what's your top lesson learned from your recent partnership?
Brian, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think one big learning, especially from a large corporate enterprise, is we're not going to achieve net zero alone, right? It's going to take deep collaborations with early stage companies like VIX, as well as policymakers. And that collaborative muscle, it needs to get worked into all big companies, right? We're over 100 years old, and a lot of things we did within the four walls of Duke Energy. And the only way we're going to get to where we need to go is through deep collaborations and important policies to drive those changes that James was speaking to. So Vic, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, and I think that's very apt, Brian. What I would say is that Duke and other large entities it brings a lot of credibility to the table. And I'll use the most recent example that we worked on together as sort of an indicator of this. I mean, we signed, Ampli was able to sign a 20-year charging services agreement late last year with Anaheim Transit, so home of Disneyland. And we signed a contract for, their entire fleet of electric buses, for the next 20 years. I don't think we would have been able to do that unless, there is a party like REC Solar or by extension, Duke Energy that was involved in that project, just bringing that credibility to the table. I mean, our customer at Ampli are, large B2B entities or public sector entities, and the decision pathways is not only, is the technology any good? Of course, as startups, naturally, that's the first thing that comes to our mind and what we are trying to work towards. But the larger picture for a B2B customer, the decision making for their part is, is this company going to be around in 5 years or 10 years to service the contract? And am I going to get fired over making this decision to go with the startup, right? So a lot of these kinds of questions would best be handled by working with Duke Energy, by working with a creditworthy entity and large institution, so that the customer gets comfort. So I guess I'll just stop there.
I'll pile onto that for a second, Vic. Any of these technologies where a company is making a decision for capital or pivoting how they've operated, the person making the decision feels the risk. And Vic alluded to that. Am I going to get fired over this? Because I went with this new emerging technology and it's risky and it sounds great, but I also have the proven technology, and in this case, diesel buses. Why do I want to push this, and is it worth it? And so I think support around them within the company that's trying to make the change, and proof points along the way. And credit's a big question mark that needs to be solved in every case, right? And in the renewable space, in the clean tech sector, there's a lot of young companies that don't have established credit. So I think that is definitely one we can lock arms with and make a lot of progress and to solve questions. But moving into that uncharted territory, you got to help that maker get there, and that's a big part of the job as an entrepreneur.
Very good points. Okay, I think we're just going to have time for maybe one more quick answer to a question. Let's see, I've got, this one's really for you, Bob, from John Thigpen. Can money from the DOE grant awarded to Jules be used to help pay for hardware-based pilot projects with key end users?
Yeah, we'll see. I think that what that $1 million will do for us will give us more money to figure out how to allocate it best across cities, towns, and corporations to accelerate innovation. Because a lot of the grant is labor to get it done. But when you add our sponsors and the grant, now we have money to share. And that is our goal, to share those monies in tranches of $20,000 to $40,000, hopefully with the city of Charlotte as one good example. So yes, I think it'll help us.
Excellent. Thanks, Bob. Okay,
all right.
I think that's it for Q&A.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. There's more questions. You can certainly, send those to me or Ryan Rutledge, the Jules crew, and we'll follow up because I see a lot of other great questions. And again, there was so much to take in from the three presenters. I really appreciate what Vic is doing, what Brian's doing, and James. The three of them together sort of represent a triumvirate of sort of what we need to accomplish very soon. So with that, we're going to go to the class now. So this is all about bringing these 6 companies to our network, connecting them, and hopefully getting them some business development traction. Because what a startup needs is a fast yes or no as to whether or not their solution and their product makes sense. And an ideal, again, outcome is a pilot or a demonstration project. So with that, we're going to take 4 minutes. I'll pop in once we get to close to 4 minutes and just let you know. But We've got rapid fire, and if there's a little time left over, there's time for maybe one question. So we're going to kick it off with Packetized Energy from Burlington, Vermont. We got Jeff Froelich, who is the co-founder, and they transform smart energy devices into valuable grid resources. So Jeff, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm assuming you can see my slides.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, let's start with the good news. Globally, wind and solar are the fastest growing sources of new power generation, but there's a catch. The generation is variable, as is demand. This mismatch shows that first, we're not able to take advantage of all the renewable generation, which as James presented is only going to be increasing over time. More critically, we see there's a general imbalance between electricity supply and electricity demand, which raises concerns about grid resilience. And this is where packetized energy comes in. We can't control the wind and sun, but through our nimble platform, we can make flexible the demand behind the meter devices, such as water heaters and EV chargers, so that demand matches supply. Now, we're not the only company providing grid flexibility solutions, but we are the only one that is leveraging a patented technology invented by our co-founders called packetized energy management. This technology has been advanced with over $4 million of ARPA-E funding and leverages the core concepts that make data communications possible. That is, instead of a device getting all of its energy needs at once, we break it up into short intervals, say of 5 minutes, and called energy packets. Each packet is coordinated independently using strategic randomization that allows it to be moved earlier or later in time, that is to be flexible, and thus matching the available supply. Furthermore, our technology is device driven. We are not collecting a whole bunch of data from consumers to create models in order to tell devices what to do. The devices themselves are telling us what they need. Now, because we are computationally light, our platform can act quickly to real-time grid conditions. So in addition to peak management provided by our Peak Crusher module, we are currently able to provide 5-minute arbitrage services through our Load Shaper module. This fall, we'll be field demonstrating Fast Tracker for real-time frequency regulation. And finally, we have a network planning tool, Grid Solver, that allows us to work with utilities to develop non-wire alternatives. Presently, we have 8 pilot projects, primarily with utilities in the Northeast, but I want to tell you about 2 new projects that we're excited about and are kicking off this summer. The first, sponsored by the California Energy Commission, will provide over 4 megawatts of grid flexibility from about 7,000 distributed devices. In the second, we will work with Orange and Rockland and NYSERDA to provide advanced grid services from about 1,500 residential devices. These projects will allow us to show how both the technology and the business model scale. Our company was founded in 2016 by myself and the co-inventors, Paul Hines and Masao Masaki. Paul is our CEO and has decades of energy experience from technology, markets, and policy aspects. We have a small but mighty team of about a dozen employees who bring a wide range of startup and energy technology perspectives to the company. Finally, we have an awesome advisory board that includes Tim Healy, former CEO of Enernoc, and Bob Zukowski, former chair of Greenlots. We're excited to be part of Joulz Accelerator program, and we're looking forward to developing partnerships to enable clean, affordable, and resilient energy future. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Put the questions on the side if you have them, because we'll come back at the end, because I want to catch up to make sure that we can meet our 11:15 goal from a time standpoint. But really appreciate your presentation. Look forward to working with you in our network. Next, we have Greg Tropsa, the president of Blue Frontier from Parkland, Florida. They can reduce AC consumption by 60 to 90%, and so that's of key interest to our community. Greg.
Welcome to Blue Frontier. I'm Greg Tropsa, president and co-founder, and our mission is to mitigate the global climate change impact of cooling buildings by slashing air conditioner energy consumption and refrigerant use, and before it's too late. You probably know that the last 5 years were the hottest on record, but did you know that air conditioning consumes 10% of global electricity production and is responsible for 5% of global emissions? But the problem is getting really much worse. The demand for air conditioning is explosive, and the number of AC units in the world will triple by 2050, consuming as much electricity as all of China and India today. The problem for the electric utility is AC units are all gulping for power at the same time, and as temperatures soar, the demand spike on the system can trigger overload and reliability concerns. Plus, AC demand is variable and out of phase with renewable generation. On the hottest days, air conditioning efficiency and cooling capacity decreases, and we call that lose-lose. So welcome to Blue Frontier. Feel free, crank up the air. We're going to deliver you superior cooling comfort. For our commercial building owners and tenants, we will deliver you 30% fresh outdoor air while independently controlling both humidity and temperature, a feat that common AC units cannot match. For our utility customers, Blue Frontier is a cost-effective, dispatchable, and flexible demand-side resource. Our integral, low-cost, and efficient salt-based energy storage is also used to dehumidify the air. It separates the consumption of electricity from the delivery of cooling, transforming this problematic AC load into a dispatchable distributed energy resource. Now, this can be optimized to soak up excess renewable energy on the grid, eliminate the late afternoon peak demand, or simply store and shift low-cost electricity. This is a drawing of our first product. It's a 5-ton unit. It's a direct replacement for the ubiquitous packaged rooftop unit found on 97% of all commercial buildings under 4 stories. The technology is proven, validated, and scalable from small window units to about 20 tons. We have engaged a contract manufacturer and are working to complete the design for manufacturing. Now, Blue Frontier is truly game-changing. Here's an example. As you can see, the air conditioning bill plummets, creating close to $3,000 per year in electricity bill savings. Over the useful life, this means more than $40,000 of savings. Now, most earlier HVAC technology products have suffered in the implementation phase. We're different because we bring overwhelming value. Think of us as the LED equivalent for cooling. Now, we use these savings to enable our HVAC as a service business model. We provide free Blue Frontier equipment to building owners. The owner passes a flat recurring fee along to its tenants. The fee is then lower than the existing electricity bill, so we call this a win-win. Blue Frontier has an exclusive license for 9 issued and 3 pending patents from NREL. We own 2 patents that cover the implementation, architecture, and control of the utility managed virtual power plant. Blue Frontier has recently closed $1.8 million seed series round led by Volo Earth Ventures, and this is leveraged by over $3.6 million in grants and contracts that have been awarded to Blue Frontier. Blue Frontier is marching through the multiple valleys of death typical of hard tech solutions, and the technology was first discovered in 2008. Our seasoned dream team co-founded the company in 2017, and since that time, we've concentrated our efforts to transforming the technology into a mass-producible product. In 2022, we will complete field testing with our utility partners. In 2023, we begin selling up to 1,000 units into target markets. And the goal of our limited sales effort is to validate product reliability, enabling rapid growth through our disruptive HVAC as a service business model. And I thank you for listening and hearing about Blue Frontier.
Thank you, Greg. Very well done and very timely. And again, in the interest of time, we'll come to the end and see what Q&A we can have for each of the startups. But each of the startups, again, will be working with us over the next 90 days to further business connections and hopefully get some business development. Next, we have from Lafayette, California, Extensible Energy, John Powers, CEO, transforms commercial buildings into flexible loads. John?
Good morning and afternoon, everybody. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm going to assume everybody's seen enough slides to last a short lifetime, so I'm just going to tell you what we're all about. I'm the president and co-founder of Extensible Energy. We make load flexibility software, and nobody knows what that is. So just think of it as next generation building energy management combined with next generation demand response. We control all the flexible loads in a commercial building for the shared benefit of the customer and the grid. So what problem do we address? Today's grid relies on flexing generation to match load. We're used to that for the last 100 years or so. But as we deploy more and more renewables, you can't dispatch any of that generation. So to a large degree, we have to flex load to match generation. Today, customers are rewarded for flexing loads by saving on their relatively fixed utility tariffs. But tomorrow, they'll be rewarded in true load flexibility markets via real-time pricing and similar market mechanisms. How do we solve this problem? With software, of course, software for commercial buildings. We make amazing AI-powered software to watch over every building's loads, temperatures, and generation, if any, as in the case of solar-equipped buildings. So we build a hyperlocal forecast of solar and whole building load, throw that into a fancy optimization algorithm, and send control signals down into the building to make changes in the flexible energy-using subsystems in the building. That could be batteries, it could be EV charging behind the meter, and in most cases, this definitely includes HVAC systems. Nobody cares when the compressors run, they only care that it's comfortable inside. So HVAC is the largest shiftable load in most commercial buildings today. This is a big deal. Load flexibility is the biggest energy opportunity of the coming decade. The energy transition to renewables on the supply side is well underway. Wind and solar are cheaper pretty much everywhere than gas and coal. As James indicated in his keynote, the first few terawatts of renewables are pretty much inevitable. The demand side, however, is where the action is. If we can tap the inherent flexibility of loads on the customer side of the meter, the true grid edge, then the transition will continue all the way to 100%. If not, we could stall out far short of that critical goal. Clean, distributed, renewable resources can improve economics, reliability, and resilience, but only to the extent we can sync up usage and generation. So our ask is simple. Put us in touch with the folks at Duke, Dominion, Southern, any utilities in the Southeast who are working on load flexibility. In addition to the innovation folks at this event, that's the demand response teams or the teams who face emerging PJM markets for load flexibility. We want to do pilots with all the utilities in the Southeast and not just any pilots. We like the pilot to project model. While my boyish good looks may hide my age, this is not my first rodeo. I have sold products to Duke and Southern before, and we never stopped at the pilot. Instead, always finished with full commercial rollout. In fact, Duke still runs software for my first startup for its C&I customers. And I don't want to say how old that product is, but it can drink and vote in nearly every state. It's time for the next generation of software in this space. So we love pilots. We're just finishing up a load flexibility demonstration project with Southern California Edison, where we demonstrated the shared value of load shifting for both the customer and the utility. And we're working on a load flexibility and resiliency pilot with California schools for Silicon Valley Clean Energy right now. But we want to prove this approach works everywhere nationwide, regardless of market structure, or for that matter, humidity. So if you're ready, we are. Let's do this together.
Great. Thank you, John. You kind of got up there and it was like, you know, come to my booth. I got some good stuff for you. I really appreciate it.
There you go.
Next, we have Antley. And now I've got an Antley of energy in hydrogen. I just have to mention Sam Poland here, who's going to present, was an intern with Jules last summer, has recently graduated from Duke and UNC, and came up with an idea with my director of business development, Ryan Rutledge, and was awarded a grant from NC IDEA to get it started. And they're in a hot space, an interesting space, and they were one of a few hundred that were interested in the program. And through the voting system, how we choose companies, they were one of the top 6. And so I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that we know Ryan and Sam incredibly well. And Sam, the floor is yours.
All right, and you guys can see my screen. Thank you, Bob, for the intro. Really exciting to be here today after spending last summer with the Jules program, working with some of these great companies. And now I get to tell you about my own. So we are Antlia Energy, Ryan and myself, and we are creating a green hydrogen credit trading platform. So we'll unpack that a little bit. And green hydrogen, as James mentioned earlier, is a critical path to deep decarbonization across the economy. And we cannot reach carbon neutrality until we have a strong, reliable, robust green hydrogen market. And let's talk about what hydrogen is. And for those of you who follow the energy trends, you've probably seen the rainbow of hydrogen. There's all sorts of fun colors out there right now.
Sam, did you want to share your deck? I'm not sure. Do you need your deck?
Not?
No, it's okay. You're doing great. It's just that your deck's not up if you want to go ahead and attach it.
I see it.
I can see it.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. I can't see it, but that's good.
Yeah.
Probably my with. Yeah.
Are we good?
So, yep, we're good.
Okay. And I'm happy to share the deck afterwards as well if you want to dig in a little closer. But so we have this rainbow of hydrogen. Gray hydrogen, we can think of that as the incumbent hydrogen, the dirty hydrogen. It comes from natural gas, which is methane, which is CH4, using water, steam, pressure, heat, splitting that CH4 into H2, CO2. Super cheap, a lot of carbon emissions. Green is really the leading alternative. It comes from water, H2O, with clean electricity, splitting into H2 and O2. There's no C in that equation. There's no carbon emissions associated with that. So it sounds great. Why are we not just going ahead with green? Well, there's three main problems here. Let's start with cost. It's expensive. The conventional consumers aren't willing or are not able to accept that price premium. And the clean electricity that drives the green hydrogen process is really geographically limited. So that leads us to our next problem of this mismatch of supply and demand, where you can start to get cost-effective prices for green hydrogen isn't necessarily where you have that demand, that premium marketplace willing to absorb that cost. Leading to the third point of transportation, it really sucks to move hydrogen. It's really energy intensive, it's inefficient, just really complex logistics to move it around that eliminates any of the benefits that you get from clean hydrogen production. So what are we going to do about it? That's where Antlia comes in. We want to be the green hydrogen credit network. And so let's look at this through an example. A project developer through the Antlia system can now develop a project where clean electricity is cheap. Antlia is going to then decouple the environmental attribute. We transfer that credit to a company looking to mitigate their carbon risk, their climate risk, and then now gray hydrogen is sold to a local consumer. And so the producer, the hydrogen producer out of this, gets access to premium de-risked markets and eliminates a lot of the complex logistics around moving the actual product, while the consumer is going to have deferred costs of development and just turnkey green hydrogen in a very complicated space. And we want to provide them, the market, the solutions to make this possible faster than under the status quo. And so with that, again, really excited to be a part of this Antlia or this Jules Accelerator program. We're working to get a pilot in place, work with these leading corporates, these leading organizations that want to see green hydrogen come to fruition. And we're collecting letters of intent and going through an angel round right now. And yeah, looking forward to an exciting 3 months.
Thank you very much, Sam. Appreciate that. Look forward to working with you. With Rated Power is next from Madrid. Gabriel, if you can kind of attach your slides, it would be great. They optimize photovoltaic project planning, and they do represent our international play.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Did you know that solar energy is the fastest growing energy source on the planet? And do you know what it actually takes to build a solar plant? We know because we used to do it. Hi, I am Gabriel Cañadas, and I am Business Development Manager at Rated Power. I am thrilled to be here today and to be able to share with you our story. Our three co-founders worked for several years developing solar plants all over the world. To get just one project done, they could spend weeks, even months, calculating formulas and algorithms and generating hundreds and hundreds of pages of engineering documentation. So one day, they thought, could this whole process be streamlined? And surprise, it could. And so we did. We developed a comprehensive software package that, by scanning millions of iterations, instantly optimizes the plant design and automatically generates all the engineering documentation. We transform 6 weeks of work into just 2 minutes. This decreases the cost of energy generated by 5%, which translates in 20% higher profitability. This is our software. It is very easy to use. Our clients just have to upload the project location, select the main equipment and criteria, and finally, in just a few minutes, they can see and download all of the documentation. Our customers are all the different players in the solar industry. We cover the whole value chain. Today, they are mainly solar developers, contractors, and engineering companies. But we are now working to integrate subscriptions for commercial, industrial, and residential solar. All of this equates to a $36 billion market opportunity. To date, there is no global software to fully carry out the design and engineering process as we do. Our competitors are other tools that automate specific parts of the solar design. Our business model is a software as a service based on annual subscriptions, and we offer a 14-day free trial before purchasing. Now, let's talk about our amazing team. We strongly promote meritocracy, diversity, and equality for growth and quality. Our founders have been working in the industry together for more than 10 years. During the past few years, we've received big awards. Among others, we were selected by Techstars and Elemental Accelerator. In just 4 years, we launched our product, simulated over 2,000 gigawatts, and we already have over 80 paying customers worldwide. Some of them top-tier companies like AES, Iberdrola, or Con Edison. We already have over 3,000 users working with PV Design daily in more than 150 countries. Now, let's talk about our future. We reached break-even 4 months after founding the company, and even though we are already cash flow positive, we want to become the standard in an industry that is doubling its size every 2 years. And this is just the beginning. We believe in a future, the same future that our customers believe in, which is not just about solar. It is about providing accessible green energy worldwide, mixing solar, wind, storage, and grid all in integrated systems. This is where we're headed, and we have the right technology to do it. To get to this summit and scale up successfully, it would be of immeasurable support to have you on our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Next, we have our, we really flew through this. We're doing pretty good on time too, so we might have time for one question or so, but this is the 6th startup, and this is Sync Energy out of Birmingham, and Robert Cabrera provides rapid predictive outage insights. So I'll turn it over to you, Robert.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Robert Cabrera, and I am the founder of Sync Energy AI. And I want to sort of start with the why we created Sync. I'm originally from Rwanda, East Africa. And in 1994, when my country went through the genocide, we survived by hiding in a tunnel underground for 3 weeks and spent 6 years in refugee camps after that. And those 6,000 refugee camps were off the grid, whereby if I needed to read a book, I'd have to read it at night on a kerosene lamp. And each time the kerosene lamp would blow out, I'd ask myself two simple questions. How do we get the lights on down here? And then how do we keep them on? Now, that same level of frustration I felt each time that kerosene lamp blew up is what people go through when they lose power during hurricane season, right? The biggest example is Hurricane Zeta, whereby over 4 million people lost power for close to 2 weeks. And that is what Sync is here to sort of solve for. And I'm going to share with you our technology in 4 simple slides. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the context, as said, part of the side effect of climate change is that natural disasters are crippling our grid. In a survey of 1,500 companies that McKinsey did, when asked what are the biggest risks to asset management over the next 30 years, the clear winner was natural disasters and climate change. And so Sync uses artificial intelligence to be able to visualize all vulnerabilities on the electric grid ahead of time. What is the context? This slide sort of talks about what the market gaps are, and there are 3 big ones. Number 1 is the current technology of using drones and LiDAR data is limited in scope and it's very expensive. However, we use high resolution satellite images to get the same level of clarity. The second problem in the industry is a shortage of talent. The grid is being upgraded with lots of sensors and lots of data, but that requires very specialized skills that is short in supply. So we built our platform to be a no-code platform whereby anybody can use it, even if they don't have any tech background. They just add the models and then click a few buttons, and then we offer the results in the background. And the third piece is affordability. Today, it takes a team of 10 data scientists, several months, and an annual budget of at least $2.5 million to be able to come up with the same insights that our Energy AI platform offers for about $30,000, and it can be ready to go in 6 weeks. My co-founder is a former team lead for National Grid in New York, and that's where the statistics came from. And so what are we looking for in the next 90 days? We are looking for more pilot projects. This is a field test we just finished with Alabama Power, in which we tested Hurricane Zeta. So 2 weeks before the hurricane happened, we were able to tell them which trees were most at risk to cause a power outage. We were able to tell them how many customers were going to lose power, the number of incidents they're going to experience, the duration of the power outage, the estimated call volume, the feeder, the section, and the device that we're going to go out. And we're able to predict this up to 87% accuracy 2 weeks in advance. With these kinds of information, insurance companies, cities, emergency planning and response teams, cooperatives, and of course utilities now have enough information to be proactive and to be able to prevent things like what happened in Texas in February. Imagine if we're able to prevent 87% of these people from losing electricity, and sort of as well as this 111 people from dying. And so what are the core values that we add and we bring to the market? There are 4 main things. When you have these predictive insights, in a pilot we did in Idaho, we're able to reduce customer downtime by 90%. This is great for customer satisfaction, but also great for a continuous business. With this increased resilience, you are able to know what to do during an extreme event, both in the short term and the long term. It also avoids a lot of cost because it's SaaS and it's no code. We can be able to deliver the fraction of what you pay for if you had an internal team. And we provide 7 very specific key insights that include the section of the grid that's affected, the likelihood, the trees, the customers, the call volume, all this again, 3 days to 2 weeks in advance. And our goal really for society is to be able to achieve less risk with less spend. And so that's our company. And here's my contact information if you'd like to keep in touch. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Well, first of all, we did pretty well. We made our time. I'd like to thank everyone that participated, everybody that joined. I mean, to have a inspirational keynote from James, for Brian and Vic about a collaboration and why it makes sense. And then the 6 presenters, Jeff, Greg, John, Sam, Gabriel, and Robert. We really hope that we can work with you over the next 90 days so that when you come back in September, you can share your journey with this class that's on the line right now and say, we have done something maybe like Amply. When you graduate, remember, you're always part of the process. Amply didn't happen in 90 days. It maybe took 18 months. But we need your technology. We need your enthusiasm. We need your ideas. And each of you that are on the phone, to the extent I will be following up with a lot of you to be advisors. And as advisors, you will work over the next 90 days to navigate the ecosystem and hopefully realize business development connections between your companies, cities, universities, and the startup. Given that it's 11:13, given that it's a Wednesday afternoon, I'm not going to ask for any more Q&A because I really appreciate the insight that happened in this time period. We did record. We can share this with you. We can follow up with questions. Thank you very much for helping us. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you to the speakers. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you all.